The galactic hall of accord was carved into the heart of a moon that pulsed with soft, internal light. It was supposed to be neutral ground where peace replaced firepower and treaties held more value than territory. On one side of the obsidian table sat the humans, battle-weary but unbroken. On the other, the towering figure of General Envar from the Korred Axis, a species known for their ruthless campaigns and unflinching discipline. When the final terms of peace were being reviewed, Earth's delegation expected resource negotiations or border treaties. Instead, General Envar rose from her seat, her armor gleaming like molten dusk, and spoke words that silenced the chamber. "I demand one of your kind," she said, her voice as cold and precise as a laser scalpel. "That human, him." All eyes turned to Corporal Tyrion Voss. He was standing near the refreshments table, holding a half-eaten protein square, blinking in disbelief. "Me?" he asked, confused. General Navarre nodded. You are to accompany me back to the Korred Corps. You will live among us, study with us, speak for your kind." Tyrion looked to his commander, who was too stunned to answer. "I'm just logistics support," Tyrion said. "I count crates." But NVAR remained still, unreadable. "You are not chosen for rank. You are chosen for reason." The council chamber erupted. Diplomats murmured. Earth's military advisors fled with offense, and Korred soldiers stood stone-faced. But NVA repeated only one phrase: "The peace hinges on this." Back in the human war tent, Commander Holden paced with fire in his voice. "We don't trade people like collectibles." "She isn't asking for a trade," said Dr. Alana Mays, the cultural liaison. "This might be some ritual, a form of bridge building." Tyrion sat on a crate, chewing the rest of his bar. "If I go, this ends the war." "She claims it will," Alana replied. Tyrion wiped his hands. "Then I guess I'm packing." Hours later, he stood at the boarding bay, surrounded by silence. The Korred flagship waited sleek, dark, and humming with unfamiliar power. NVR descended the ramp in ceremonial black armor, her expression unreadable. "You came willingly?" she asked. Tyrion nodded. "I figure peace is worth a weird field trip." As they stepped into the ship, the doors closed with a hiss. The stars beyond flickered as the engines roared. Tyrion had no idea what he was stepping into, but if being a war trophy was the price of saving Earth, he'd do it with snacks in his pocket and a joke on his lips. Invar walked beside him in silence. "You're not going to dissect me, right?" he asked, her eyebrow barely moved. "You were not here to be broken, human. You were here to teach us what makes your kind unyielding." The inside of the Korred flagship was a vast expanse of metallic halls lit by soft violet light. Everything pulsed, alive with energy that Tyrion couldn't quite understand. He walked behind General Envar in silence, his boots echoing louder than hers. Around them, alien officers in segmented armor stared at him, but no one spoke. He felt like an animal in a zoo. "You're not exactly rolling out the welcome mat," Tyrion muttered. N single quotes VAR stopped. They have never seen a human before. Most expected a conqueror or a coward. You are neither. You confuse them. "Well, I confuse myself most days," Tyrion said with a shrug. "So we're off to a great start." She led him to a chamber with a high ceiling and strange floating symbols. In the center stood a black pillar with embedded lights flickering in patterns. Invar motioned for him to step closer. "This is the archive core," she explained. "Place your hand on it, Tyrion." hesitated. Is this gonna fry my brain? Nevar raised a single brow. No, but it will record your emotional signature. He sighed, stepped forward, and pressed his palm to the pillar. A warm pulse traveled through his arm. The pillar responded, shifting from black to a glowing blue. The floating symbols flickering with new energy. Invar blinked. It accepted you faster than I expected. What does that mean? It means you are not just tolerated here. You are ... resonating. Tyron stepped back. Yeah, well, I'm told I have a very agreeable aura. That night, he was given quarters bare, but clean. The walls shimmered faintly with heat, adjusting to his body temperature. He lay on the unfamiliar bed staring at the ceiling, thinking of Earth, of his sister back home, and of how he had somehow gone from organizing food crates to becoming an alien ambassador. The door chimed. He sat up. Yeah. NVA entered, unarmored for the first time, wearing a soft black robe that shifted like flowing stone. You are not sleeping, she observed. Kinda hard when you're light years from home, Tyron replied. And no offense, but your walls breathe. It's unsettling. She stepped in, her hands behind her back. I do not sleep much either. For a moment, the silence was comfortable. Then she asked, Do you know why I chose you? Tyran looked at her, honestly. I figured it was either a prank or a cultural misunderstanding. She walked to the wall, tracing her fingers along a glowing vine-like pattern. During the war, I intercepted footage of you. You weren't fighting. You were tending to wounded, cracking jokes, refusing to leave others behind. You carried a broken drone on your back for miles because it reminded you of your brother. Tyron blinked. Wait, you watched me. I observed many humans, she said softly, but only. One made me stop and ask, ... why? Why risk your life for something no one ordered you to do? Tyron stood up. Because someone has to. Because that's who we are. She nodded. That answer, I believe, is more powerful than any weapon. The next morning, he was summoned to the Hall of Resolve, a chamber shaped like a coliseum, Korad. Officers lined the edges, and Nevar stood at the center. This is a proving, she said. Not of strength, of essence. They will question you. Do not lie, lie. I barely remember breakfast, Tyron said. But he followed her into the circle. One by one, Korad commanders asked him questions. Why do humans fear silence? Why do you laugh in battle? Why save enemies? Why weep when you win? Tyran answered with honesty. Because silence feels like failure. Because laughter means we're still alive. Because even enemies deserve dignity, and we weep. Because winning doesn't mean forgetting what it cost. There was silence afterward. Not cold, but thoughtful. Invar turned to the council. Let this be the start. Let his words mark the bridge. Later, as they walked the glowing corridor back to his quarters, Terran asked, So, did I pass your space sat? You did more than pass. Invar replied, You proved that humanity is more than survival. It is meaning. He grinned. Guess I'll need a title now. Galactic logistics philosopher. She actually chuckled. For the first time, Tyren didn't feel like a prisoner. He felt like he was part of something new, something that might change more than just his life. It might change the whole galaxy. The Korad vessel hummed with life as it cruised through deep space, its engines leaving shimmering trails like comet fire behind them. Tyron stood on the observation deck, a thin mug of something warm and spiced in his hands. It wasn't coffee, but it was close enough. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the transparent walls, beautiful, alien, silent. Behind him, the door slid open. He didn't turn. Let me guess. It's time for another weird test that ends with me giving a speech and confusing your generals. It is not a test, came Nevar's voice. It is a lesson. Tyron smirked and turned around. She stood in her polished armor, but something softer glimmered behind her expression. Not weakness, curiosity. You always this dramatic? He asked. I am Corid, she replied. We are born to stand firm. Well, lucky for you, I'm human. We're born to fall down, get up, and make a joke about it. She tilted her head, which is why I requested your presence. He followed her through the winding halls of the flagship. This time there were no glares. The crew nodded slightly as they passed, the stiff resistance fading into something like interest. Where are we going? He asked. To the memory garden, she said. The ship opened into a chamber filled with softly glowing crystals. They floated weightless, each giving off a pulsing light. When Tyrion stepped closer, one flashed and replayed a series of holographic moments, images of Corid warriors lost in battle. These are our fallen, Envar said, quietly. They live on through memory crystals. Each one carries the essence of who they were, their courage, mistakes, and questions. Tyrion lowered. His voice, that's actually beautiful. She reached into a recessed panel and withdrew a new crystal. It was blank. This one is for you. He blinked. Wait, what? You are not Corid. But you represent a shift in what we believe is worth remembering. He looked at her, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I'm just a guy who once built a working water pump out of spare drone parts and a spoon. That act saved 30 lives. He looked down, humbled. I didn't do it to be remembered, precisely why you must be. He touched the crystal. It pulsed with soft blue light and began to hum. Later, in his quarters, Tyrion sat with his hands wrapped around the mug, staring at nothing. Kesh, the first officer, stepped in silently. May I join you? Sure, Tyrion said. Plenty of awkward silence to share. Kesh sat across from him, blinking his 4 eyes in slow rhythm. You confuse our logic. You lack discipline, avoid protocol, yet our warriors now greet each other with high fives. It spreads. Tyrion grinned. It's called culture shock. You'll be okay. Kesh studied him. Why do you insist on self-deprecating jokes? You minimize your worth. Tyrion leaned forward. Because if you take yourself too seriously, you stop growing. If you're not laughing, you're not learning. And let's be honest, I've been flying blind since day one. Kesh stood and gave a short nod. Perhaps your chaos is a kind of wisdom. The ship slowed its warp drive, and the stars outside began to settle. A new world came into view, covered in blue fields and thick rings of clouds. Envar summoned him to the main bridge. This is Drexery 4, she said. Unclaimed, uninhabited. We survey its atmosphere for future expansion. Looks peaceful, Tyrion said. Envar turned. We will go down together. I want you to see how we begin, with you beside us. As the shuttle descended, Tyrion sat across from her, watching her read something on a tablet. For once, he didn't joke. He just watched. The way her face softened when no one else was looking. You know, he said, you're different than when we met. She glanced up. So are you. The shuttle touched down. The air outside was crisp and filled with glowing pollen that danced on the breeze. Tyrion stepped out first and felt his boots sink into soft soil. It wasn't earth, but it felt like a beginning. NVAR stood beside him, her hand resting near her blade but not on it. "You once asked me why I chose you," she said. "I remember." She looked at him fully, her voice quiet. "Because in a galaxy built on power, I needed someone who chose empathy." Tyron didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Behind them, the crew began setting up equipment. Around them, stars rose. On the horizon, and in the quiet between alien winds and human thoughts, something new began to form, not just peace. Understanding. Tyren sat on a smooth boulder overlooking the fields of Drexery 4. The land stretched out in swirls of color, lavender, grass under a teal sky. Strange creatures moved in the distance, tall and graceful, their shapes barely visible in the mist. He chewed on a strip of dried rations and watched the Corrid soldiers work. They moved with purpose, like pieces in a machine, building sensor, towers and atmospheric filters without needing a single word spoken between them. NVA stood nearby, her arms crossed as she observed her crew. She hadn't said much since they arrived on the surface. Her expression was calm, but Terran had spent enough time around her to recognize the way her jaw tightened when something troubled her. He tossed a small rock into the air and caught it. "You ever get tired of all this?" She didn't turn to him. "Of command, of holding everything together, pretending you've got all the answers." Now she looked at him. "You think I pretend?" He smiled slightly. "I think you carry the weight of 1,000 decisions no one ever sees." NVA said nothing for a while. Then, "Yes, I tire of it, but I serve because I must. There is no room for what I want." Tyron stood, brushing off his hands. "That's the difference between us. Humans don't last long, so we chase what we want like it's the only thing keeping us alive." She raised an eyebrow. "And what do you want, Tyron Voss?" He laughed quietly. "Honestly, a cup of real coffee, maybe a beach, a place where I don't feel like a tourist in my own life." There was a long silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that let thoughts settle into truth. Later that evening, the Corrid lit a ceremonial flame, strange violet blaze that floated mid-air and pulsed with rhythm. It was tradition, NVA said, to ignite it when claiming new territory. Tyran watched the flame with quiet interest. "We don't do this for conquest anymore," she told him. "Not since you arrived. We light it for unity now." He looked around at the crew, then back at her. "You really think one guy with a smart mouth and messy hair changed your whole empire?" "I think," she said softly, "you reminded us what connection feels like." The next day, Tyron wandered beyond the encampment. He needed air, real silence. Not the cold, sterile kind the ship provided, but the kind that wrapped around you like a warm coat. He found a ridge overlooking a lake with golden water. He sat, breathing it in, when a rustle caught his ear. Turning, he saw a Corrid, youth barely, more than a child, staring at him from the brush. Big eyes, curious but wary. Tyran raised a hand slowly. "Hey there," he said gently. "You lost." The child didn't respond, but stepped forward, drawn by something. Tyran noticed the cracked armplate the kid wore. It was half a uniform, probably left over from one of the camps. "Here," Tyran said, pulling out a small music player from his pocket. He played an old Earth tunes, low and soft, something his sister used to hum during blackouts. The child listened, transfixed. When Tyran offered the device, the child reached for it and held it like it was sacred. Moments later, Korred warriors emerged from the mist. One called out a name, and the child ran to them. Tyran turned to see Neva behind him. "You followed me," he said. "I always know where you are." He looked back toward the retreating figures. What happens to them now? "They return to the learning cast," she said. "They will remember this moment. So will their mentors." He smiled. "Music builds bridges." NVA stepped closer, her voice low. "So do people. You are one." Tyron turned to her, meeting her gaze. For a long time, they said nothing, but something had changed. They walked back to camp side by side. No titles, no ranks, just a people alien and human walking across a quiet world, learning to meet halfway. The Korred flagship hovered above Drexery IV like a silent sentinel, casting a long shadow over the new outpost below. Inside, the bridge was tense. Lights blinked in warning patterns across the control panels, and distant alerts echoed from the communication deck. Tyron stood near the viewport, watching the world they had just begun to understand slip away beneath them. Behind him, Invar stood tall, calm but focused. The ship had intercepted a distressed call from a rogue Korred war faction refusing to honor the peace. "They've attacked a neutral colony," Kesh reported. "They claim your presence among us has dishonored our legacy." Tyran ran a hand through his hair. "So I'm the reason your people are fighting again?" "No," NVAR said firmly. "You are the reason we can face this with something other than destruction." She looked at her crew. "Prepare the intercept course." Within minutes, the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into lines, and the tension on the bridge thickened. Tyran walked beside Envar as she checked systems. "You're really going to fight your own people to protect a peace they don't believe in?" "I will fight to protect what we've built, with you, with them, with all of us." He nodded. "Then I'm with you." The ship exited, warped near a scorched moon, its surface littered with ruins and black smoke. The rogue Korred fleet hovered in orbit, aggressive and waiting. "Open a channel," NVAR commanded. The screen lit up, revealing a grizzled commander with deep scars and fire in his eyes. "You've brought a human into our bloodline," he spat. "You shame us." Navarre didn't flinch. "This human showed us who we could be beyond war. He is not our shame, he is our future." The connection cut. Moments later, plasma fire rained down. Tyran barely had time to reach a support beam before the ship rocked violently. Explosions echoed through the halls, and Korred officers moved with disciplined urgency. Terran turned to Envar. "I'm not staying behind," he said. "If you're in this fight, so am I." She nodded once. "Then come with me." They rushed to the tactical command deck. Envar issued orders with precision, directing energy shields and deploying countermeasures. Tyran jumped in where he could, running data feeds, recalibrating shield generators, patching power systems. "Why are you helping?" one of the Korred crew asked him amid the chaos. "Because you're my crew now too," he replied. "And you don't let your people fight alone." In a final move of strategy, Invar led a detachment directly onto the enemy ship with Tyran at her side in reinforced armor. The fighting was fierce, blinding light, close quarters, combat, and chaos all around. Tyran fought with every ounce of his training, ducking blasts and using his agility where brute force failed him. But the turning point wasn't violence. It was Tyran standing in the middle of the enemy command deck, face bruised, weapon holstered, speaking words that silenced everyone. "You think I'm your enemy? But I'm just a guy who believed there had to be more than killing each other for old ideas. I didn't come here to change your ways, I came because I was asked to understand them. But I won't apologize for what we've built. You can hate me, but it won't stop what's coming next. Peace, unity, a galaxy that doesn't tear itself apart just because it's easier than trusting someone new. He waited for a shot that never came. Then the rogue commander lowered his weapon. Slowly, the tension ebbed. Hours later, the ceasefire was official. The rogue fleet surrendered. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a single human's words breaking through centuries of silence. Back aboard the flagship, Tyron stood at the observation deck again. This time, the stars didn't feel so cold. NVAR joined him. Her armor scratched, but her eyes soft. You gave them something I could not, she said. Yeah, he replied, exhausted. What's that? Permission to believe in something different. He smiled. That's what we do, best humans. We dream first, then we dare. She stepped closer. There is one more question I must ask. He turned toward her. Go ahead, will you stay? He didn't speak for a moment. Then he looked at the stars, back at the ship, and finally into her eyes. With you? He asked. She nodded. Tyrion reached out and took her hand. Then I already have. In that moment, they weren't just human and corrid. They were proof that even the most distant worlds can meet if someone dares to take the first step. And so began the next chapter of the galaxy together.